So this is all the good stuff. Now let's think about the other side, right? I think the million-dollar question is, what do we think the Supreme Court will do? Would the Supreme Court be likely to strike this down? Wouldn't it just be seen as a violation of Citizens United or the First Amendment? So, Sarah, I'll come to you on this first, but welcome others' thoughts. If the premise is that a corporation is defined as an entity without the power to spend in politics, then wouldn't it be that Citizens United is irrelevant? Is that how they're going to look at it? Does that hold up legally in your opinion?
Yeah, so conceptually, because corporate law is state law, the state defines the contours of the corporation and its authority and its powers. And we have always seen the United States Supreme Court being quite deferential to the principle of state corporate law. And so I think if the Supreme Court were going to be consistent with its past precedent and its past approach, it would have to defer to state law decisions about state corporations. However, there are reasons to worry that instead the Supreme Court might start thinking about the First Amendment. And so, as you were saying, Tom, in Citizens United, the idea that case advances is that the corporation is sort of exercising First Amendment rights derivatively on behalf of the human people who animate the corporation, right? So the human people are the rights holders in this idea. And so you can sort of I can imagine a rather strained argument that the Supreme Court could try to make that, if it really wanted to hold on to corporate political speech, that maybe by withdrawing these powers, that the state has somehow impaired the First Amendment rights of the human people who are incorporated in Montana corporations. So in other words, I would sort of assume that maybe the Supreme Court would try to undermine this through the First Amendment. But that argument, I find that argument to be it is a challenging argument, I think, for the Supreme Court to advance. First, because it does ride roughshod over the idea, the sanctity, if you will, of state corporate law. If it turns out that we have this sort of federal law gloss on this aspect of state corporate law, then we probably have a federal gloss over lots of aspects of state corporate law. And there are lots of areas where, we care about states' rights and garden variety corporate law. We might not like that. So the court might be reluctant to do that, to import the First Amendment in this way.
Also is potentially a violation of the 10th Amendment, right? Because the 10th Amendment reserves those rights not explicitly given to the Congress and the federal government to the states.
Well, I suppose so. I think that if the Supreme Court were thinking clearly about it, the court would be very reluctant to use the First Amendment to sort of get at this through this derivative theory. Having said that, though, I'm not super confident that it will hold itself back, because Citizens United did seem to evince a real commitment to corporate political speech and spending, even to the point that I think the court was sort of saying facts that were not correct, which has already come up in this in the panel and the preceding remarks, right? So I'm interested to hear what other people have to say about this.
Tom, do you want to jump in?
Thank you. One of the first questions we get is like, well, haven't you read Citizens United? It's like, yes, we've read it. There's been the first thought through all this. And one way to think about this is, if usually every campaign finance case the court has ever seen, two things are true. One is that it's a fully empowered corporation that the court said, oh, you've got this general grant of power, that must include the power to spend in politics, therefore you've got this right, and we'll talk about that right. So that's every corporation for the last 100 years that's come before the court has been defined as that kind of corporation. They've never seen a corporation that was not granted the power to spend in politics. So that's one thing. And the other is that it's always a state or the federal government regulating the rights in some ways. So there's if you've got a statute and it's like, okay, you can't do these things, and you add something new, okay, you can't do this new thing. The court has an eraser, not a pen. The court can just take an eraser and say, wait, that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. And so they can restore the status quo by striking that regulation or that new restriction. But this isn't that. This is the affirmative grant of powers by the state to their corporations. And so if the state is handing out a list of powers to its corporations and the court says like, no, you really needed to add this power too. You really should be giving this power away also. The court can't pick up a pencil and do that. And it doesn't have the authority to write new things into statutes. It can only take offending things out of statutes. And so one of the things we try to do is build this in a way that it's just affirmative grants of power. There are no restrictions. There's no negative language, no limits. It's just, it's things that we've made it. They may flip it, but we're going to make them work for it. And every bit of the structure of this has been made to make them work for it.
And so, Tom and Jeff, it sounds like in the version that Montana's moving forward with, that you've contemplated, really step one is to say we're going to take away all the powers, and then we're going to put just a enumerated set of positive powers forward. Is that sort of to the point that you were just making?
Yeah, that's one part of it. So the idea is, first, you strike all the powers that all corporations have, which the court has said over and over again, states have the authority to do. And then you say, okay, now we'll give you back almost everything. And so if the court decides it wants to strike that, like, you can't just give back some, what they're left with is striking all the powers altogether. And that result doesn't make the problem any better, it makes it worse. And basically, one of the other things about courts is that if they don't have a remedy that actually remedies the problem, they don't have jurisdiction. So, and there are some things that come before a court where they cannot remedy it, and therefore they don't have jurisdiction over that. And we have tried to construct it in a way that would be the case.
Did you want to